If you've been scrolling through a dozen feeder options, watching videos, reading spec sheets, and still feel stuck wondering which one actually lives up to the hype, you're not alone. The biggest fear is spending hard-earned cash on a machine that sounds perfect on paper but ends up sitting idle because it can't handle the wood you actually feed it. I've been in that exact spot, and the goal of today's review is to cut through the noise and help you decide if the Powermatic 4-roll power feeder is the tool that will finally move your material the way you need it to. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Let's break down what you'll see in a real workshop, the hidden trade-offs, and who should really consider pressing that add to cart button. First off, the feeder's heart is a continuous-duty 1 HP motor that drives a gearbox and then the feed rollers through a roller chain and sprocket system. In practice, this means the motor can run for long shifts without overheating, a real advantage if you're doing a production run of cabinet doors or a marathon of veneer strips. The chain drive also gives a positive, slip-free feed, so you won't find the rollers stalling when you push a denser hardwood through. I tested it on both soft pine and a stubborn maple that tends to bind on cheaper rollers, and the feed stayed smooth. The downside? Because the chain is the primary power link, you'll hear a faint whirring sound that's louder than a belt-driven feeder. It's not a deal-breaker, but in a small, insulated shop it adds a bit of background noise. The next practical piece is the feeder's adjustability. The support column can be set horizontal, vertical, or at an angle, and the universal joints lock the whole assembly in place without any wobble. For a shop that switches between sheet goods, dowel rods, and irregularly shaped blanks, that flexibility cuts down on the need for separate machines. Changing the rollers is also a breeze. A simple hand tighten on the axle and you can swap out the 4-inch aluminum rollers for larger or softer ones in under a minute. That modularity is where a lot of the value lies. If you ever need to upgrade to a softer roll for delicate veneer, you don't have to send the whole unit back to the dealer. The trade-off is that the rollers are not pretensioned. You have to spend a few seconds after each change to make sure the chain tension is right, otherwise you might get a slight skip on the first pass. Now, who should actually buy this feeder? If you're a small to medium wood shop that runs a steady stream of parts, think cabinet shops, furniture makers, or even hobbyists who build multiple projects a week, the 4-roll power's solid cast iron base and the ability to lock the feed angle will keep your material moving safely and consistently. It shines when you need repeatable feed for repetitive cuts on a table saw or CNC router, because the motor's continuous duty rating means you can leave it running for hours without fearing a burnout. On the flip side, if your work is mostly one-off projects, you only need a feeder once in a while, or you're operating on a very tight budget, the upfront cost may outweigh the occasional convenience. Also, anyone who expects a whisper-quiet machine for a residential garage workshop might be disappointed by the chain-driven sound signature. The real moneymaker here is durability. The body and base are poured cast iron, so the unit won't shake loose over time, even when you're feeding heavy, vibration-inducing hardwood. The universal joints absorb the bulk of that vibration, delivering what feels like a near-silent, vibration-free feed once everything is locked down. In my experience, that translates to less wear on the rollers and less strain on the motor, which prolongs the machine's life. The only practical weakness I noticed was the lack of an integrated dust collection port. In a shop that already runs a dust extractor, you'll need to rig a hose to the roller housing, which adds a small setup step. Also, the feeder does not come with a built-in safety guard. You'll need to install your own barrier if you have apprentices around, something many entry-level users overlook. Bottom line, the Powermatic 4-roll power feeder delivers on its promise of reliable, adjustable, continuous-duty feeding, and it does so with a level of robustness that justifies the price tag for anyone who feeds material daily. If you fit the profile of a shop that values consistent throughput and can appreciate the small trade-offs like a bit more noise and the extra step of adding a dust capture solution, this feeder is likely to become a silent workhorse in your workflow. If you're still on the fence because you only need occasional feeding or you're extremely noise sensitive, you might be better off with a simpler, belt-driven unit. Either way, the decision comes down to how much you value uninterrupted production.